What's up, gangsters? If you happen to watch my last video, you know that I have started building the Kotare 1/32 scale Spitfire Mark 1A. And what I normally do is a two-part sort of build review thing where I get into, the details after I'm done with the cockpit and talk about what I think of the kit at that point. And then I do another one when I finish the project. And I don't normally do anything else, but I feel like after getting this far that there's enough to talk about to warrant another video. I mean, let's be honest, it doesn't take much for me to feel like there's enough to talk about. But I actually do think there's some important things here for other would-be builders of this very good kit. So let's see what it is. Okay, so just very quickly, a little housekeeping from the previous one. There were some people who had questions about the landing gear quadrant assembly that I printed, that I designed in Fusion 360 and printed, and here's a bunch of them. This is, as always, I print a bunch of them at once because that gives you parts to practice on and it doesn't take any longer than printing just one. These are printed in the frozen 8K aqua resin, and yeah, the 8K part doesn't really make much difference. They advertise it as being optimized somehow for 8K resolution printers, and I think that's just marketing horseshit. I honestly can't tell much difference between it and the Anycubic Craftsman Gray that I love so much, and that is now called Anycubic Craftsman Gray DLP. As if, you can somehow make it specifically for a DLP printer. Anyhow, these are printed at 20 microns, and you can kind of see how I oriented it, and yeah, not much more to say than that. I mentioned that I had pre-print drilled some holes for the hydraulic lines. You can kind of see them there underneath. Anyway, so that's that. Another thing about the inside that I forgot to mention is that in the list of stuff you have to change if you want to update this thing to a late production Mark 1A is this part number A23 for the flare chutes. You need to get rid of the one in the front, and I just chopped it off. It's not like you're really gonna see it because it's down inside there. You can kind of see it. You can see the back one, but where you definitely will see it is on the outside, because right here on the bottom of the wing subassembly is a sort of a little hatch for it that you have to remove. And that's a good point to talk about this one, because this is the hatch for the one that you keep, and it's I'm gonna bitch a little bit. It's one of the things about the way the kit's molded that I'm not super stoked about. It falls into the same category as the seat belts, in that it is just not very crisp. And the reason is very much because of the limitations of injection molding. Because with the fuselage being molded in halves, when you get around towards the center, which is the parting line of the tool, you have to avoid undercuts. That's why you don't have any of the sticky outy rivets right there next to the parting line, because you could put them on there, but at a minimum they're just going to get ripped off when the tool ejects the part. And the same thing applies here. The whole bottom curved edge is going to be an undercut because that thing sticks out from the rest of the surface. And I totally understand that, but I just kind of wish they had done it differently, because what you're left with is a sort of very vague shape, And you can see that I did a very vaguely bad job of scribing around it. I mean, that might be the right shape. It's definitely kind of weird because it's sort of more round on one side than the other. That might be right. I don't know. But I wish that they had, I mean, I know they can't really put an embossed panel line there, but I think what I kind of wish they might have done is given you, like, I don't know, a real thin photo etch part, or maybe even a mask, because you could literally put something that's as thick as a piece of tape on there and paint over it, and it would be a pretty good representation. Or maybe a photo etch template that you can use, that you can super glue on there and use it to scribe that shape, and then just take the super glue, to pop it off. There's a bunch of different ways that you could go at that. If you had even a mask file that you could download from their website, you could probably use if you have a silhouette portrait, or certainly a silhouette cricket, you could cut it in like 5 thousandths thick styrene and then just glue it on there. Again, there's a bunch of different ways to do it, and if I were going to do it over again, I would do one of those things, but try not to get too far down the rabbit hole on this thing. It's just something to consider. Now, speaking of the way the fuselage splits, this is one of those cases where I love the way that this thing is engineered overall. They've done some stuff that I think is, it's a little bit shocking that we would consider it innovative, because it seems so obvious, but it's just really smart. And one of those things is that this spine part is a separate piece. And that accomplishes two things. One is it gives you those aforementioned sticky outy rivets right there on top that you wouldn't be able to get if you tried to mold them into a fuselage half. It also obviously keeps you from having to deal with a seam line that would run right between those two rows of rivets. And I think it's great. And the fit on this part is remarkably good. It's one of those things where if you're going to do this, the fit has to be perfect, because, again, you cannot be forced as a model maker to have to deal with a seam at the bottom edge of that part, and it's basically invisible right there. The vertical seam is a little more invisible there, a little bit more visible right there, but still, it's all good. I really commend them on getting the fit really good. I will say this: I had to sort of put this on there in 2 stages, because the back part fit perfectly, and so I was able to just hold that with my fingers and put some extra thin in there, and it was all good. But the front part didn't want to lay down perfectly, and I couldn't figure out why. I thought maybe there was something underneath right there that was interfering, but that wasn't the case, because I worked on that and it didn't solve it. I think that maybe this part had a little bit of longitudinal warpage, just a slight amount, but it wasn't a big deal. Like I said, I just put some light clamping force on the front of it after the glue set up on the back part of it, and it was all good. No problems there. The one thing that I don't totally understand, and this will answer your questions about why this is already dark earth around this position light, is that they've got you putting that position light in from the underside. And yeah, it creates a perfect surface separation. And what I've done here is go ahead and take the area around it all the way to the top color, so that I don't have to worry about perfectly masking later. I'm still going to probably have a clear coat to deal with when I do a flat coat, but that's not as big of a deal as trying to mask for perfect color separation on something like that. Anyhow, I get that, but you could get the same thing by having it where you inserted that light from the top at the end. And I don't know, maybe their feeling was that represents the possibility of smushing glue out all over your, perfectly painted model. I don't know, but I think what I would have done to avoid that is make it where this light had a stem on the bottom of it that was maybe, even 2 or 3 millimeters long, rather than just having a shallow assembly pocket like most of them do. And with a stem being that long and going into a hole on the underside of this part, you can put your glue down in the bottom of that hole and not worry too much about it smushing out. Just a different approach. But regardless, it fit just about perfectly, and you can see that it looks good. Other places where I was really, really impressed with the engineering, everything really about the nose. Of course, we've got the fly making a guest appearance. Everything about the nose was really good. Everything fit really well. And the same thing applies to the way that they engineered the wing root. This is something that I haven't seen anybody else do. And if it's not apparent from the assembled kit, here's what happens. The wing root fillets are completely separate parts. And that's actually the way it is in real life. The whole wing gets bolted on, and then those parts, D10 and D9, actually it's 4 different parts, but point being is that's aluminum sheet metal that goes over the top to hide the wing joint with the fuselage. And I think it's clever, and it fits perfectly. Like, if you can see it because I had primer on the wing part, but not on the fuselage part, and you can see just how tight and perfect that joint is. And that's what you want, because you really don't want to have to be fucking with that later, filling it, scribing it, etc. And the same thing was true down on the wing itself. But I have to say, it's almost too good. And I know, you're like, what? How can it be too good? And here's why. And this is where personal preferences intersect with engineering strategies, because and fit quality. Because the fit is pretty much perfect on these parts, on this armor plate that goes over the gas tank, the nose part, these cheek panels, and also on the chin part. All pretty much perfect. I had to put a little bit of pressure on this chin part to get it down as tight as I want, but the operative phrase there is as tight as I want. Because what I'm after is for all of these panel lines, as they'll end up being, to be not only in existence, but uniform. Especially where I'm going to use a black wash to indicate panels that can be removed. And I want those to be uniform. I want them to be crisp. And so when the fit is so tight, like it is on this right here, there's very little panel line. It's not going to retain a wash very well. And that's pretty much the case with all of these nose parts. And so I ended up spending quite a bit of time re-scribing those. It's kind of hard to say re-scribing because they're there. It's just that, like in the case of where the hood meets this armor plate, it's more of a tiny little step than it is an actual panel line. And that's good because that makes it real easy to run a razor saw along that edge and get your panel line to be the way you want. And again, that's just purely a matter of personal preference. And I don't know how you would engineer around that. I guess you could mold it so that there's a panel line sort of recess on the edge of the hood part. I don't know. There's different ways to approach it. But, it's a perfect fit. But in this case, for me, a perfect fit that's so tight you couldn't fit a grasshopper's eyelash in it is not actually perfect for me for my end goal that I have in mind. So I also ended up spending some time scribing a panel line around this joint down here, because there was a little bit of a step, and if it had been uniform along the entire length of that joint, it would have been fine. But the problem was, like right here, it was perfectly flush. There would have been basically no joint visible at all by the time everything got primed and sanded. And so I had to engrave that, which was not, I'm not gonna lie, it was not a lot of fun to follow that curve, and it's not as perfect as I'd like, but it'll be fine. Point being is that if your goal is to have panel lines, you need to pay attention to that early on. Another thing is, again, because of the limitations and not getting undercuts, if you want the fasteners on the edge of this fuel tank part, you need to put those in right here. And this plastic is pretty hard. I used a beading tool to do that, and create the little circles, and I had to push pretty hard to get it to work. The other thing that you can see on this side is where the door goes in, and you have to do that work to fill the seam that's underneath that. And it wasn't hard, it was fine. It was just that it's a little bit of a hassle, because you have to avoid these rivets that are sticking out right here. So you just have to sand carefully. And it just kind of goes back to me feeling like that this was not the most modeler friendly strategy for this thing, and that I personally would have liked to see some other option. But again, it's not that it's hard, it's just something you have to deal with. I kind of feel like, and this will sort of bear itself out as the project moves on, that I kind of wish that I could take the panel lines from my Arma 148 PZ11C kit and transplant them here, because those panel lines on that Arma kit, and their Mustang is the 172nd Mustang is the same way. They are the best panel lines I've ever seen. They are perfectly rectangular in cross section and very crisp, and they hold a wash perfectly. I'm a little concerned that these are going to be troublesome, because they look just a little soft and not very deep, but we'll see. But look, you're going to have to be careful with how much paint and primer you put in these if washes are important to you. And I could rescribe them, but I feel like it's kind of marginal, and I'm going to take the chance because I'm feeling lazy and I want to just move on. All right. Another thing I really love about the engineering is the way that the tailplane goes in. This strategy of having the horizontal stabilizers be one piece that slips in from the back. Again, it's astonishing to me that it took us until 2024 for this to become a thing, because it seems so obvious. It's just so much better than trying to put one in on each side, which, I mean, if you're an aircraft modeler and you say you've never had them be uneven, then you'll lie about other things too. I mean, I can tell you from my brief experience as an IPMS judge, it's the number one reasons that aircraft models lose out on possibly being first, second, or third, because these things might have a slight elevation difference. And it's absurd that, you could have a world-class model in every other aspect, but a 0.5 millimeter difference in the height of this tip versus this tip would, make it ineligible for an award. But yeah, that's the way it is, and that's a whole other conversation. Anyway, this engineering decision could, make things a lot harder for those IPMS judges, and I'm fine with that. I just hope that it's a strategy that catches on, because it really, really is good. I've got the rudder, and it slips right in. And I love that they've positioned the elevator for, this downward tilt, because that's pretty common with Spitfires on the ground. And I love that they have positioned the rudder with a slightly jaunty angle to it, because I tend to like to do that myself. But I'm not going to put it in there permanently, probably until, I don't know, I might even not do it till the end. I may have this thing fully painted before I put it on there, because obviously I want to not snap off the aerial wire mount right there. So that's good. I like that it's a nice fit. One thing about that area that I had to deal with is that when I put the tail plane in, I noticed that the fit was just beautiful on top. But that on the bottom, while it was tight up here at the front, that it was not so good back here at the back. There was a little bit of a gap. And so all I did to fix that is I slipped a piece of 20 thousandths styrene in the joint there and spread that out so that it tightened up that joint with the tail plane pretty much perfectly. You can see still a little bit loose there, but it's all but perfect. And that was a super easy fix. Might not be the sort of thing that would bother you, but yeah, that's definitely the kind of thing that I pay attention to. And it may not be the same on everybody's kit. That's one of those things where it could just be a matter of, variability in molded parts. Okay, the next place where I had to do a little bit of chicanery is with the wing. You've probably already seen that I've got a shim right here at the back end of the wing subassembly. Why can't we focus? And that's kind of a bummer, but as such things go, that is relatively easy to deal with. All I did was just take a piece of 20 thousandths styrene sheet and glue it to the end of this part, and then work it until it fit both the inside and the outside profile. And I still have a little bit of work to do yet there, but I wanted to, obviously I had to wait till I got the wing in, and I was, going to do some other things. So not too big of a deal. And to be fair, I've seen that joint be like that on every Spitfire kit I've built. And I don't know what it is about that joint that makes it a problem, but I will say that I asked two other builders, both of whom are very good, and they had the same issue. So I don't know. There was a fourth guy that was kind of acting like, well, I didn't have that problem. And I would only say this, that it's kind of hard for it to be user error when this joint is as perfect as that. And if the whole wing subassembly was too far forward, that would have affected the chin part, because it nestles right in there into that little crotch. And if that boundary was too far forward, then you'd see this chin piece sticking out, as well as the fact that there's a slot and tab underneath this chin piece that if it was that far off, the slot and tab thing wouldn't have gone together at all. As it was, the alignment front to back of this chin piece was perfect. So yeah, it's not that. There's just a gap there, and I don't know why, but it is what it is. It's relatively easy to fix. All right, last thing is to talk about the wing subassembly. There's a couple of things going on there. I really love the way that it's engineered. The internal structure is super simple and super strong. The way that the wheel well parts go in, they were tight, I'm not gonna lie. I had to put a little clampage on them, but it wasn't too big of a deal. I didn't have to adjust anything. It just needed a little bit of force and some Tamiya extra thin to lubricate it, and it all went together really good. The way that spar fit in there was beautiful, really beautifully engineered. All of that stuff I just love. Now let's talk about the landing gear, because as you can see, I've got one of them in, and I want to really stress that if you're building this kit, because I was, don't do what I did, or nearly did, and wait until you have everything painted and think that you're going to just put this gear in there and that it's just going to fly into its home. I was warned by my buddy Robbie Knopfs, who's a very good builder, that this was going to be tight. And so I was going to check it before I even had the top of the wing on. And that's what I would recommend. But I just kept forgetting, and here I am with, all this work done. But it's not, not too big of a deal. The important thing is that you really need to take the struts off the sprue and at least understand how they go in here. Make sure they dry fit, because it's not intuitive. It's very clever. I love the way that these are engineered, but it's different from anything else I've ever seen. And what happens is that these tabs, that tab that sticks out on the left side of that gear part, A35, nestles into a channel that's inside the wing that's created by the spar and the lower surface. And so not only is there a lot of structure there, but it should do what I'm always whining that landing gear so rarely do, which is go in there at the exact right orientation. It's just, again, landing gear is kind of, for me, like tails. It's astonishing that they are so often so poorly engineered. Because if there's anything on a model airplane that should be absolutely unambiguous, it's your landing gear, because they typically have a very distinct, orientation that needs to be right. And at the point where this stuff is all painted and you're putting this on there last, that's not the time to be fighting with stuff or worrying about how to, prop your airplane up on blocks so that it won't collapse. This thing is going to hold its own weight even without glue. And I love the way that it's engineered. But the fit, as with some of this other stuff, is very tight. So tight, in fact, that I couldn't even get the part in there. And you can see, if you look down inside here, okay, look down inside if I can get the angle right, just barely, maybe, I don't know. Okay, look down inside there by where my finger is. See that open slot? Okay, that is where that long tab sticking out is going to go. And they've rounded the end of it to give you some lead in to hopefully guide it into place. And then what's going to happen when it's all the way in and it's nestled into the notch of the wheel well opening like that, is that this round surface right there between my two thumbnails that represents the, I guess it's a big pin or something between that angled flange and the gear strut, that should be nestling up against this round surface that's right inside the opening there, just above my thumbnail when it's all the way in. All right? And that's what happens when it goes all the way in there. But you can see that it's not like, they kind of show you in the instructions, but it's still, or maybe I'm just an idiot. It's not going to be really intuitive. And if you've already clipped both of these off, you may lose track of which side is which. So again, you can see that surface, that edge there, and you're going to just drop that in there and then slide it all the way in. And that's what it should do. But as I said, mine did not want to even start to go in there. And Robbie had warned me of this, and he told me that I needed to be prepared to relieve some material off of this tab. And the reason that I've only done one of them is because I wanted to show you exactly what I had to do. You can see that I took about 0.5 millimeter off the one that I adjusted from this edge right here. That's the back edge of the part. And I also relieved all of the sharp corners, because anytime you're going to take a square tab or a rectangular tab and try to get it into a tight rectangular opening, the corners can be the thing that interferes. So if you just break those corners off with a file, like I've done here, then you've potentially eliminated that problem. But I also found that when I put the part in, that those corners were hitting in other places as well. And let me show you if I can. Like, you can kind of see with it just sitting here. Oh, yeah, see what I was saying before about remembering which side they go on? That was me trying to put it in on the wrong side. When you get it in there, and yeah, my stupid lobster hands, I'm so clumsy. Doing stuff like this on camera, not good. You can see that tab is gonna want to hit the underside of the edge of the opening for the landing gear. And so breaking those corners on the tab can help you with that. The other thing that I had to do, though, was if you look at the back side of this part, you can see where this cone-shaped thing is right here. That's the end of like the pin or whatever that goes through that part of the gear. That shoulder sticking out there was bumping into the outside, the back edge, the outside of the back edge of the opening, and it wasn't going to get past it. At least not without making everything really loose. So, yep, I just straight chopped it off flush right there. You can see the difference between the two, maybe. You can see the difference there between the two parts where I just chopped off a little bit of that cone-shaped shoulder. And that did it. Flies in there, you can see, goes in and out pretty easily, which is exactly what I want. It's going to have a little bit of slop, so I'm going to need to make sure that they're properly oriented. But I feel like that with both of them in there and it's sitting on its legs, that they should take the same angle. And if nothing else, that'll give me an opportunity to measure the wingtips and make sure that it's, sitting properly relative to the world. So, at any rate, that's everything that I thought might be relevant to any of you folks that are building this kit. But let me, emphasize that none of what I've talked about here changes my opinion that this is a really, really beautifully engineered kit. It's a very good kit. I finally understand what Matt McDougall meant when he said it's playfully engineered. When he said that, I was kind of like, I don't even know what that means, but I think now I do. It's fun to put together. And the challenges that I've talked about here, some of those certainly come from just my own demands based on what I want the thing to look like when it's done, and may not apply to you at all. So don't get hung up on that. None of what I said there, like about the fit being like almost too perfect, is a knock on the quality. The fact that they were able to get the fit to be that perfect is really, really commendable. So anyway, that's that. Okay, there you go. A little bit of a rundown on some of the things if you are going to build the Kotare 1/32 Spitfire. I hope you found that useful, not too long and drawn out. And as always, I appreciate you watching. Much love.